closer because the wire's pretty weird. Yeah. Can you hear me all right? Even our friends in the back? There we go. Well, we're going to be getting the march started in about 15 or 20 minutes, so we thought that in the meantime, while we're waiting for more buses to roll in and for more people to show up, that we would just share a few things with you about what's going on around the world. Because to be a pro-lifer in a country where abortion is legal can sometimes be a depressing thing. It's depressing, of course, to consider the reality of why we all have to gather here today. But I've had the opportunity over the past several years to hang out with a lot of different pro-life groups from a lot of different countries. And so one of the things that I have found most encouraging, that I wanted to encourage all of you with today, is the fact that when you march for life here in Canada, you are marching with people from all over the world. Because despite the fact that countries around the world have legalized abortion, and despite the fact that in nations around the world, babies die as a result of abortion, it is also true that wherever a culture of death rises up, a culture of life rises up to meet it. And it is... And one of the things I find most encouraging about pro-life marches is that a pro-life march is made up of people who reject the idea that preborn children should not have human rights, and it is a visible symbol of resistance to those who think that these children should suffer in silence and go unremembered, unmourned, and unfought for. And so I want to share with you just a few of the things that have been taking place around the world. I can never tell if they're cheering me or trying to drown me out, but I find it encouraging. So let me just give you a few examples of places that have joined you today in marching for life this year, last year, and coming up throughout the year. On January 22nd, hundreds of thousands of people marched for life in Washington, D.C. On January 24th, thousands of people took to the streets in Paris, France, to fight for life and against euthanasia there as well. And those numbers get even bigger. On March 25th, over 2 million pro-lifers marched in Argentina, this following on the heels of more than 3 million people marching last year after the Argentinian Senate voted against the legalization of abortion by only a handful of votes, proving that a culture of death can be definitively rejected. Moving on, and one of the reasons I find this news so encouraging is because, again, I know a lot of pro-life people tell me they feel very alone because sometimes where they are in their towns and their cities, maybe in the places where you come from, sometimes it might feel like you're the only pro-life person or the only person who holds that opinion. But when you start to take a look at what's going on in other countries, it's just incredibly encouraging. Just to give you another example, last month in April, there were marches for life in more than 600 cities, towns, and villages across Romania and the Republic of Moldova, and that's up from only 23 cities only 5 years ago. In March, on March 31st, thousands of people marched for life in Brussels, Belgium. On May 4 in Colombia, more than 500,000 people marched for life in 61 cities across the country. On May 5th in Brazil, thousands of people marched for life in Rio de Janeiro. In Austria, silent marches remembering the victims of abortion have been held in Linz, Salzburg, and Vienna. Last year, thousands marched for life in Bern, Switzerland, and thousands more plan to march this year in Zurich. I was just in Switzerland, and they said these marches are a moment when pro-lifers can look across the crowd and say, I am not alone, and these are the people I will fight with side by side to make sure that no life goes undefended. The list is longer. More than 5,000 people marched for life in Berlin, Germany. More than 100,000 in Berlin, Ireland. More than 1 million marched to protest legalization in Mexico. 20,000 marched in Guatemala City, where that country was planning to legalize abortion. Thousands marched on the Capitol and demanded the government back down, and they did. When the people speak, and they use their voices for the preborn rather than using their voices to try and drown them out, like our very good friends just across the way there, we see real change actually take place. Again, last year, shortly after that massive rally I just told you about in Guatemala City, we had thousands of people march on the presidential palace in Chile demanding more protections for preborn children. The government of Chile responded by promising to do whatever they could to ensure that the rights of all human beings were respected, even those who were not yet born. And I could go on. The March for Life in the Netherlands has grown by more than 4 times in just a handful of years. I've had the privilege of attending that March for Life in The Hague, and my colleague Micah Rosendahl has had the privilege of speaking there. We've seen huge marches for life in Australia, in New Zealand, in Nigeria. We at the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform get messages from people as far away as Uganda, asking for help, asking for how they can reach out to their culture and educate people on what abortion actually is and how they can fight abortion. So it's just important to remember that when you're here and when you're marching for life, you are marching in solidarity with millions of people around the world. Those people are willing to take to the streets as well. And there is a growing movement that refuses to accept our culture's supposition that a culture of death can flourish for multiple generations. There is a younger generation that's standing up and saying we can do so much better than this. And in many countries, the government is being forced to listen to them and forced to back down. One of the things I just wanted to share with everybody here, because it's always a beautiful thing to see so many people take time out of their day to show up to brave Toronto traffic, for those of you who were as foolish enough as I was to actually try to get through traffic to get here, and to actually show up and to make your voice heard and to show yourself and show the politicians, show our good friends across the way, show the public here in Ontario that not everybody accepts this culture of death that was imposed on us in 1969 and was expanded in 1988, the year I was born, to include babies right up until birth. And one of the things that I find so encouraging is the fact that your presence here is an indication of a truth that a lot of pro-lifers don't even fully consider. We often talk about the fact that the preborn human being has a right to life. That's true. We would all obviously agree with that. But the preborn child in the womb also has the right to something else that we don't think about nearly as often. The preborn child also has the right to our defense. As the youngest and most vulnerable members of our society, members of society that are continually ignored and drowned out by those around us, they have the right to be defended by those of us who recognize their worth, recognize their value, and are capable of actually making a stand on their behalf. It's kind of interesting. Somebody asked me a little while ago, why is it that so many times when abortion supporters show up to protest, why is it that they have to yell so loudly? And the reason for that is that they're trying very desperately to drown out the sound of their own conscience. We know that children in the womb have no voices for themselves. They have no voices that they can actually use. We know that they are snuffed out silently, that nobody can ever hear them, that they will never have a chance to raise their voices in their own defense. And that is one of the reasons it has been so easy to victimize them for so many years, is we simply cannot hear what the victims have to say. And one of the reasons that abortion protesters are, again, so threatened by the fact that you are all here today, that we're out here to speak for life and to represent those who have no voice is because they know that when we speak for life, when we talk about abortion, when we show people who the preborn child in the womb is and what abortion actually does to them, they know that when people hear that, they will listen. That when people hear that, they choose life. That when people hear that, they suddenly realize that there is something more good, beautiful, and true than what is on offer on those signs over there. And so they have to use their voices to try and drown yours out. But it doesn't look like it's working today. So we're going to get started here in just a few minutes. We have to clear this stage and get ready for the speakers over there. Again, thank you all so much for coming out. And what I want to leave you with briefly is just consider as you stand here that you're standing in solidarity, not just with the people you're standing shoulder to shoulder with right now, not just those marching in Ottawa today or in Edmonton or Victoria. You are standing in solidarity with millions around the world who know what you know, and that is that preborn children are worth fighting for, and I'm so glad that you are all using your voice for them today.